Close your eyes. I need you to actually do this. Close your eyes for just a moment and imagine something. It is December 21st, 1974. You are not inside the stadium. You are hundreds of miles away, maybe sitting in your car in a parking lot because you cannot bear to drive while the game is happening. Maybe huddled around a kitchen radio with your father and grandfather. Maybe alone in a room, clutching the device like it contains your entire reason for living. The Oakland Raiders are losing to the Miami Dolphins in the playoffs. 26 seconds remain. The season is about to end. Your team is about to lose. And then a voice cuts through the static. A voice that does not sound like any sports announcer you have ever heard. A voice that belongs in a symphony hall, or a poetry reading, or a Shakespearean theater. A voice so rich, so textured, so impossibly perfect that you forget you are listening to a football game. That voice begins to describe what is happening on the field, and as it speaks, you see everything. You see the formations, you see the desperation, you see Ken Stabler scrambling for his life, you see the football floating through the December air. And then that voice screams words that will echo through Raiders history forever. Stabler throws into the end zone, caught by Clarence Davis. Touchdown, Raiders. Your kitchen explodes. Your car shakes with your screaming. Strangers on the street hear your celebration and know exactly what just happened. You have just experienced the greatest radio call in NFL history. You have just heard a man transform a football play into a religious experience. You have just witnessed proof that the right voice can make you see things more clearly than your own eyes ever could. But here is what haunts me. If I asked you to name the greatest voices in sports broadcasting history, you would probably mention Vin Scully. You might say Howard Cosell. You would definitely reference some ESPN personality who has been marketed to you for the past 20 years. You would not mention the man who made that call. And that silence is the greatest injustice in sports broadcasting history. Because the voice that brought the sea of hands to life, the voice that made generations of Raiders fans fall in love with football, the voice that elevated a brutal sport into something approaching art, that voice has been forgotten. Tonight, I am going to tell you about this man, but I am not going to give you his name yet, because his name means nothing without understanding what he represented. His name is just letters without feeling the full weight of what he created. First, you need to understand what radio meant to football fans in the 1960s and 70s. Today, we take television for granted. Every game is broadcast in high definition. Multiple camera angles capture every moment. Slow-motion replays let us see things the human eye could never detect in real time. But in 1966, when the Oakland Raiders hired their new play-by-play announcer, television coverage was limited. Many games were blacked out in local markets. Millions of fans experienced football through one medium only: radio. And radio demanded something that television never required. Radio demanded imagination. When you watch a game on television, the images are provided for you. The camera tells you where to look. The production tells you what matters. You are a passive observer consuming content that has been pre-digested. Radio is different. Radio requires collaboration between the announcer and the listener. The announcer provides words. The listener provides pictures. Together, they create something that neither could produce alone. This collaboration only works if the announcer is extraordinary. If the words are wrong, the pictures fail to form. If the voice is flat, the imagination stays dormant. If the description is generic, the experience becomes ordinary. The man the Raiders hired in 1966 was not ordinary. He was a classically trained intellectual who had studied philosophy. He was an opera lover who could quote composers and poets with the same fluency that he described running plays. He was a sailor who understood that life existed beyond sports. He was a reader who consumed books the way most people consume oxygen. And he had a voice that God had clearly designed for one purpose only: to make human beings feel things through sound. When this man described a football play, he did not simply tell you what happened, he made you experience it. His vocabulary was vast, his rhythms were musical, his crescendos matched the action with precision that seemed supernatural. He could make a routine first down feel important. He could make an important moment feel historic. And when something truly historic occurred, his voice rose to meet the moment in ways that still produce chills decades later. The Raiders understood immediately what they had found. Al Davis, who demanded excellence at every aspect of his organization, recognized that this announcer was a competitive advantage. Opposing teams had broadcasters. The Raiders had a weapon. Because when you listened to Raiders football through this man's voice, you became a Raiders fan. You could not help it. His passion was contagious. His love for the team bled through every syllable. His calls made you feel like you were part of something larger than yourself. Millions of fans across Northern California grew up with this voice as the soundtrack of their autumns. Children who could not attend games at the Coliseum gathered around radios with their fathers. Families who could not afford tickets experienced every touchdown, every interception, every moment of glory through words painted by a master artist. This announcer did not just describe Raiders football, he was Raiders football. For 27 seasons, his voice never wavered. 27 seasons of calling every game, every play, every moment that mattered to the silver and black faithful. 27 seasons. Think about that number. He called the rise of the Raiders from AFL upstarts to NFL champions. He called 3 Super Bowl victories. He called Hall of Fame careers from beginning to end. He called the greatest plays in franchise history with descriptions so perfect that the audio recordings are more famous than the video footage. And across those 27 seasons, he never became complacent. He never phoned it in. He never treated a meaningless September game with less passion than a playoff elimination. Every game received his full genius. Every listener received his complete dedication. Now let me tell you about the moments that made him immortal. December 21st, 1974, the game I described at the beginning. Raiders versus Dolphins in the AFC Divisional Playoff. The Dolphins are the defending Super Bowl champions. They are seeking a 3rd consecutive title. They have one of the greatest teams in NFL history, and with 26 seconds remaining, they are winning 26-21. The Raiders have the ball at their own 32-yard line, no timeouts remaining. The situation is desperate beyond desperate. Ken Stabler, the quarterback, drops back to pass. The pocket collapses. He scrambles left, looking for any option, any possibility, any miracle. He throws toward the end zone. The ball floats toward a crowd of bodies. Dolphins defenders surround the target. There's no chance this pass can be completed. And then Clarence Davis emerges from the mass of humanity with the football, somehow secured against his body. The announcer's call of this moment is considered by many to be the single greatest piece of sports broadcasting ever recorded. His voice rises from calm description to explosive celebration in a fraction of a second. The transition is seamless. The emotion is genuine. The words are perfect. Madden is on the field. He wants to know if the ball was caught. Those 12 words spoken in the aftermath of the touchdown capture everything. The chaos, the disbelief, the need for confirmation that what just happened actually happened. He called it the Sea of Hands. That name came from his description of the play, of the bodies reaching for the football, of the seemingly impossible catch that emerged from that chaos. The Sea of Hands, a phrase he invented in the moment, a phrase that has defined that play for 50 years.
That is the power of his genius. He did not just describe history, he named it. 3 years later, December 24, 1977, he would create another phrase that lives forever in Raiders lore. Baltimore Colts versus Oakland Raiders. Double overtime of a playoff game. The Raiders are facing elimination again. Ken Stabler throws deep to tight end Dave Casper. Casper makes the catch at the Baltimore 14-yard line. The play keeps the Raiders alive. The announcer describes Casper's route with a phrase that captures both the geometry of football and the magic of the moment. Ghost to the post. Casper's nickname was the Ghost. The route was a post pattern. The announcer combined them instantly, instinctively, brilliantly. Ghost to the post became the name of that entire game, not because the league named it that, not because ESPN created a graphic, because one announcer, in one moment, found the perfect words. The Raiders won that game on another Casper touchdown. They advanced to the AFC Championship, and forever after, that playoff classic has been known by the phrase one man created in real time. But perhaps his most famous call came on a play that was controversial, chaotic, illegal by most interpretations of the rules. September 10, 1978, Raiders versus San Diego Chargers, final seconds of the game. Oakland trailing by 6 points. What happens next is so insane that even the announcer struggles to process it immediately. Ken Stabler, about to be sacked, intentionally fumbles the ball forward. Running back Pete Banaszak bats the loose ball toward the end zone. Tight end Dave Casper kicks it, then falls on it in the end zone. Touchdown. Raiders win. The play was chaos personified. It violated the spirit of football. It probably should have been ruled an illegal forward pass or intentional grounding, but the officials allowed it, and the announcer called it with a mixture of disbelief and euphoria that perfectly captured the moment. The ball flipped forward, is kicked by Casper into the end zone. Casper falls on it. The Raiders have scored. The Raiders have won the football game. He did not editorialize. He did not analyze the legality. He described what happened and let the madness speak for itself. That play became known as the Holy Roller. The league changed the rules the following season specifically because of what the Raiders had done. The play lives in infamy, and the call lives forever. Holy Toledo. That was his signature phrase, his verbal fingerprint. Whenever something extraordinary happened, those two words exploded from his microphone. Nobody knows exactly where the phrase originated. He used it for decades. It became so associated with him that fans would shout it in stadiums when big plays occurred. Holy Toledo was not just an exclamation, it was a promise. It was his way of telling listeners that something magical had just happened, and they were lucky to be experiencing it. His name was Bill King, and for 27 seasons, he was the most important person in Oakland Raiders football not wearing a uniform. Bill King was born in Bloomington, Illinois in 1927. He discovered broadcasting as a young man and knew immediately that he had found his purpose. But unlike most broadcasters who followed predictable paths through sports media, King took detours through literature, music, and philosophy that would shape his unique style. He was not just a sports fan who happened to have a good voice. He was an intellectual who happened to love sports. This distinction mattered enormously. When Bill King described a football game, he brought references and vocabulary that other announcers simply did not possess. He could compare a running back's moves to a ballet dancer and make it sound natural rather than pretentious. He could quote poetry in the middle of a broadcast and have it enhance rather than distract from the action.
He made listening to football feel like a cultural experience. He elevated the sport without diminishing its raw passion, and his appearance was as distinctive as his voice. Bill King wore a full beard long before it was fashionable. He dressed in suits that would not have been out of place at an opera premiere. He looked like a 19th century ship captain or a professor at an elite university. He looked nothing like what you expected a sports broadcaster to look like. But that visual distinctiveness was merely a reflection of his inner uniqueness. Bill King was simply different from everyone else in his profession. Different in how he prepared, different in how he delivered, different in what he cared about. He cared about words, about rhythm, about truth. He would not exaggerate to create excitement. He would not lie about what he saw. If the Raiders played poorly, his broadcast reflected that reality. He respected his listeners too much to manipulate them, and in return, his listeners trusted him completely.
When Bill King told you something happened, it happened exactly as he described. When Bill King expressed emotion, that emotion was genuine. When Bill King called a game great, it was great. That trust took decades to build, and it never wavered. The Raiders moved from Oakland to Los Angeles in 1982. Bill King continued calling their games. The team moved back to Oakland in 1995. Bill King was still there. Coaches changed, players retired, ownership evolved. The one constant was that voice on the radio, painting pictures of silver and black football for anyone willing to listen. He finally stepped away from Raiders broadcasting after the 1992 season. 27 years, a lifetime, an era unto himself. But Bill King did not retire from broadcasting entirely. He continued calling Oakland Athletics baseball games until the very end. October 18, 2005. Bill King died from complications following hip surgery. He was 78 years old. The news spread across Northern California like a death in the family, because that is exactly what it was. Bill King was family to generations of Raiders fans. His voice had been present at births, weddings, funerals, celebrations, and heartbreaks. Fans remembered exactly where they were when they heard Bill King call the Sea of Hands. They remembered listening to Ghost to the Post with their fathers. They remembered Holy Toledo echoing through their childhood homes. Those memories were not just about football. They were about life, about family, about the moments that bind generations together. Bill King was the thread connecting those moments. His death severed something that could never be repaired. The tributes poured in. Players he had described spoke of how his calls had captured their careers better than any film. Coaches praised his preparation and professionalism. Fellow broadcasters acknowledged that they were in the presence of a master every time they worked beside him. But here is what happened after the tributes faded. The NFL moved on. National sports media moved on. The NFL broadcasting industry moved on. Bill King slipped into obscurity. His calls, which should be required listening for anyone studying sports broadcasting, became difficult to find. His legacy, which should be celebrated alongside Vin Scully and other legends, became a regional memory rather than a national treasure. The greatest voice in sports history became a voice that nobody talks about. Why? Because Bill King spent his career in Oakland, not New York, not Los Angeles, not one of the cities where national media empires are built. Because Bill King worked primarily in radio, not television, not the medium that creates celebrity and lasting fame. Because Bill King was a Raiders employee during an era when the franchise was at war with the NFL establishment. The league had no interest in elevating anyone associated with Al Davis. And because the sports media industry has a short memory. They celebrate whatever is current. They forget whatever is past. Bill King deserved better. He deserved national recognition while he was alive. He deserved a prominent place in the Pro Football Hall of Fame broadcasting wing. He deserved to be mentioned in the same breath as the greatest voices who ever called games. He received none of that. But here is what he did receive. He received the love of millions of fans who still remember every word of his greatest calls. He received the knowledge that he had perfected his craft over a lifetime of dedication. He received the privilege of describing some of the most iconic moments in professional football history. And he received immortality through those who refused to let him be forgotten. The Sea of Hands lives because Bill King called it. Ghost to the Post lives because Bill King named it. The Holy Roller lives because Bill King captured its chaos with the perfect words. Those moments are not just Raiders history. They are NFL history. They are American history. And Bill King is the reason we still experience them with the same intensity that fans felt in 1974, 1977, 1978. If you have never heard Bill King call a football game, I need you to search for his recordings after this video ends. I need you to close your eyes and let his voice paint pictures in your imagination. I need you to experience what Raiders fans experienced for 27 seasons.
You will understand immediately why this man was special. You will feel it in your chest. You will wonder why nobody told you about him before. And you will join the community of people who refuse to let the greatest voice in sports history fade into silence. Bill King did not just call Raiders games. He taught generations of fans how to love football. He showed that sports could be elevated without being pretentious. He proved that words, chosen carefully and delivered with passion, can create experiences more powerful than any camera angle or graphic package. He was an artist, and the silver and black was his canvas. Holy Toledo indeed. Bill King deserved better from the sports world that forgot him, but he does not need their validation. He has ours. If you believe Bill King deserves to be remembered, subscribe to this channel. We tell the stories of Raiders legends who have been overlooked by the mainstream sports media. Share this video with anyone who ever listened to a Raiders game on the radio. Share it with anyone who understands that the right voice can change your life. Share it with anyone who needs to know about the greatest announcer they have never heard of. The Silver and Black has produced many legends. Bill King was the one who told their stories. And now, someone needs to tell his.